Breaking tonight, Ukraine strikes back, Russia stretches. Hulyaipole stands unbreakable. Ukraine's defenders crushed 20 Russian assaults in a single sector, stopping the enemy cold. Putin prepares missile to hit Europe. A shocking warning from the US Army Minister shakes NATO capitals. And Russia is on fire again. Krasnodar hit by one of the biggest drone attacks of the entire war. Explosions lighting up the night sky for hours. This is Ukraine Today. I'm Zoroslava Kolesnikova. Stay with us because the news tonight is explosive. Hulyaipole holds Ukraine, stops 20 Russian assaults. The front is stabilizing again. Ukrainian forces have crushed more than 20 Russian storming attempts near Hulyaipole and not a single breakthrough was allowed. The enemy threw anything they had, but Ukraine held the line.
The Ukrainian armed forces have regained control of the situation in Hulyaipole. In the area of the settlement, more than 20 attempts to storm our positions have been repelled, and no new breakthrough has occurred. This is reported by the defense forces of southern Ukraine.
Today, a new defensive line has been established in Hulyaipole, and accordingly, the landscape of the area will be taken into account. Unfortunately, this is not the industrial Donbass. However, there are rivers and forest belts here which make it possible to hold on to the positions we currently have.
As it became known, after the Russian advance in this direction, the command decided to redeploy part of the reserves to Hulyaipole. At the same time, Russia has already rushed to claim that its troops have entered the district center itself. However, this information has been refuted by our Center for Countering Disinformation. The disinformation spread by Russian public channels about the occupation of the village of Vysoky has also not been confirmed.
They have only minimally approached our fortified area and logistics center and are trying to send separate groups to the outskirts of Hulyaipole. Once again, intense fighting is taking place. Our brave defenders there have apparently received some crucial resources and vital reinforcements, and there is currently ongoing fierce fighting to effectively stabilize the overall situation in this particular direction.
At the same time, analysts say that Pokrovsk remains the main focus of the enemy's efforts. Attacks are taking place around the clock both in the city itself and on its outskirts, in hopes of encircling the Ukrainian forces.
The enemy currently controls the vast majority of the city of Pokrovsk, specifically the southern and central districts, and is actively attempting to carry out such aggressive actions, as well as gradually encircle it completely, thereby tightening the strategic ring around the nearby city of Myrnograd.
However, in their endless assaults in the Pokrovsk direction, the Russians are suffering enormous losses. Our command does not hide the fact. The main task of the armed forces of Ukraine today is to inflict maximum damage on the enemy's group, and the defense forces are handling this perfectly.
The losses are so great that they have to use reserves that, in theory, were not intended to enter Pokrovsk. That is, and even with operational reserves, Russia cannot take Pokrovsk. Right now, on average, more than 200 enemy bodies are being laid per square kilometer. That is both killed and wounded, and that's an enormous number.
At the same time, in addition to defending, our military in Pokrovsk sometimes manage to advance as well. In particular, as reported from the ground, there are periodic sweeps of the enemy beyond the railway line, which now serves as a kind of dividing line in the city.
The defense forces are indeed succeeding in counterattacks, which are being carried out, among other places, near Pokrovsk. We're talking about Kupiansk, we're talking about almost all our locations where the Russians are trying to advance.
Speaking of Kupiansk, according to Putin himself, the city is surrounded and under Russian control. In reality, there is no encirclement whatsoever, and there are fewer and fewer Russians in the settlement with each passing day.
Unfortunately, the enemy is still present in Kupiansk for now. It is quite possible that the defense forces will be able to improve their tactical positions. Today, I'm not saying that we will be able to completely drive out the enemy, although the current trend in Kupiansk shows that the defense forces are managing meter by meter to clear our Ukrainian land of the enemy.
And good news came yesterday from the occupied territories. In particular, details have emerged about the strike on Crimea. Thus, the General Staff reported that on the peninsula, the Panzer S-1 and Tor M2 air defense systems were attacked, after which drones managed to destroy a drone warehouse, Orion and forepost, as well as strike a command post and a concentration of enemy personnel.
Local Z channels were in a panic, claiming that all sorts of devices were flying in, even Mavics. And Mavics? have a range of 10 kilometers. So where were they launched from and by whom? Well, obviously not by the Ukrainian military. Then who and from where? So these are those very same naval drones whose involvement was once again confirmed by the Z channels. They apparently served as mini aircraft carriers delivering Mavics, which then take off and destroy the target. In this sense, Mavics are actually the perfect tool. So if they manage to deliver them to the shore from there on, these tools are practically indestructible.
Essentially, the defense forces have used a new tactic where one large drone delivers many smaller ones to the attack site. And considering that everything went successfully, it looks like the Russian rear will soon be facing a lot more problems.
Putin stockpiling missiles to strike Europe. US warns Russia is burning again. Unknown drones struck the Novokuznetsk oil refinery in the Samara region. Locals counted up to 10 explosions and bright flashes lighting up the sky. At the same time, the US delivers a chilling warning. According to Army Minister Dan Driscoll, Putin is amazing missile for potential strike on Europe. Is Russia losing control at home while preparing something far more dangerous abroad?
Scandals are no obstacle to negotiations. Kyiv is preparing for the next rounds.
There will be important negotiations next week, not only for our delegation but for me as well. And we are laying a solid foundation for such negotiations. Ukraine will stand strong on its feet. It will always stand. Thank you to everyone who helps us.
The preparations for further negotiations were marked by yet another extraordinary event. Anti-corruption agencies conducted searches at the home of Andriy Yermak, the head of the Ukrainian negotiation team.
Today, NABU and SAP are indeed carrying out procedural actions at my home. The investigators are facing no obstacles. They were given full access to the apartment with my lawyers present who are cooperating with law enforcement. I am providing full cooperation from my side.
As a result of the searches, no charges have been brought. But already on Thursday evening, Yermak resigned. Meanwhile, the Kremlin received a revised peace plan from the US and Ukraine during the negotiations in Geneva.
The US handed over to Russia the parameters of the plan agreed with Kyiv in Geneva. Discussion of the document is scheduled for next week.
It is now absolutely clear to everyone, especially after the leak of those recordings of Dmitriev and Ushakov's conversations. The leaks about the so-called United States plan, the peace plan, show that it was a special operation by the Kremlin.
After the previous 28-point US plan was leaked to the press, causing a serious stir and a wave of criticism, the White House classified the latest version of the peace plan. And now even European diplomats do not know what is in the document.
This is an unprecedented situation from a diplomatic point of view. None of us have this information.
Meanwhile, Viktor Orban, Putin's Trojan horse in Europe, arrived in Moscow for a visit. At a meeting with the Hungarian Prime Minister, Putin tried to revive the idea of negotiations with Trump in Budapest.
That was Donald's proposal. And where did it come in then? He immediately said, "We have good relations with Hungary, you have good relations with Viktor, and so do I." So I'm suggesting this option. Of course, we would be happy to agree. And if, during our ongoing negotiations, it truly comes to using the Budapest platform, I would also be very pleased.
So, in fact, Orban's visit, the Hungarian Prime Minister, is precisely about Moscow setting up the next trap. And all of this is happening in parallel with the supposed consideration of the United States peace plan already revised in Geneva. No, we need to be very clear that they are not interested in this revised plan at all.
Moscow's goal is to pull the wool over Trump's eyes. Lies, manipulation, distortion of concepts, and simulated activity. Putin and his gang are doing everything possible to avoid taking real steps toward ending the war. But at the same time, not to spoil relations with Washington.
Now, we can already see that at this stage, Pest has once again started to appear on the agenda, and of course, without Kyiv and without Brussels as a potential meeting place for Trump and Putin. And of course, Putin, or rather, will be pushing Trump toward a kind of second Alaska. Because, as they constantly put it, these 28 points were made taking into account the spirit of Anchorage. Now, the Russians will undoubtedly try to implement this significant spirit of anchorage in a potential and upcoming meeting, perhaps in the near future.
The best evidence of the aggressors' absolutely non-peaceful intentions is the battlefield, where the occupiers are only increasing their activity and the intensity of their assault operations, continuing their offensive in Donbas and the Zaporizhzhia direction.
Russia under siege, Krasnodar hit by one of the biggest drone attacks of the war. One of the longest and most massive strikes since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. That's how Krasnodar Governor Veniamin Kondratiev described last night's assault. Drones targets across the region for hours, triggering explosions, fires and panic among residents. How did such a massive strike break through Russia's defenses? And what does it mean for the war ahead?
One of the longest and most massive attacks since the start of the full-scale war. That's how the head of the Krasnodar region, Veniamin Kondratiev, described the overnight attack on his region. Drones also targeted the Russian city of Taganrog in the Rostov region. An aircraft manufacturing plant was attacked there. The Ukrainian General Staff confirmed the destruction of a Russian experimental A-60 aircraft, as well as a drone manufacturing facility.
This aircraft is equipped with laser equipment, and it is the only one of its kind in the Russian aerospace forces. That is why this is an unprecedentedly successful strike by Ukraine's defense forces on legitimate military targets on the territory of the occupying country.
In addition, in Novokuznetsk, Russia, there was a strike on an oil terminal. Stenders and a launcher from an S-400 air defense missile system warehouse were hit. The Tuapse oil refinery was also struck.
Let me remind you of the tactical and technical characteristics of the bars. It has a range of about 700 kilometers for hitting targets and a warhead weighing from 50 to 100 kilograms. The long-range Neptune has a target engagement range of about 1,000 kilometers. Therefore, striking legitimate military targets on the territory of the Russian Federation is further proof of the successful work of the Ukrainian defense industry.
It is also unsafe in the Russian digital space. Ukrainian hackers broke into the alert system in the Krasnodar region, which resulted in the activation of chemical and radiation alarms there.
Thoroughly disinfect residential premises and ensure you have stocked up on drinking water and food supplies.
Instead of defending their own regions, the Russian army was firing at Ukrainians. A video appeared online showing at least 8 caliber missiles being launched from Novokuznetsk towards Ukraine.
There they go, flying. The 8th one is off. Look, there they go, flying. Look.
At the same time, the Russians attacked residential buildings where peaceful people were sleeping. The president of Ukraine stated that the enemy struck several regions of our country, but the epicenter was Kyiv. According to him, the occupiers sent more than 460 drones into Ukraine, 4 of which entered Moldova and Romania.
Such attacks, not only on Ukrainian territory, but also on the territories of Moldova and Romania, should undoubtedly be regarded as a tactic by the Russian Federation to raise the stakes during the time of major international meetings.
The situation along the line of contact remains tense. The occupying army is trying to break through in Pokrovsk.
Ukrainian defense forces managed to carry out a sweep practically in the city center. This refers to the successful actions of Ukrainian assault units in the area of the Pokrovsk Pedagogical College, Soborny Square and the railway station. In addition, the Ukrainian defense forces expanded their zone of presence both in Pokrovsk itself and accordingly carried out a series of successful counterattacks.
The defenders on the Kupiansk front are not allowing the occupiers to break through the Ukrainian defenses. Here, the Russians are trying to break through with small assault groups, but the Ukrainian armed forces immediately stop them. Our defenders are employing an active defense tactic on the Zaporizhzhia front and seize every opportunity to launch counterattacks.
That's all for today on Ukraine Today. If you want the truth to stay louder than Kremlin lies, like, share and subscribe. Your support keeps us fighting on the information front line. Stay strong, stay informed and stay with Ukraine.